So one thing that I've learned is if you at least have some sort of asset protection in place, like some sort of estate plan, some sort of trust. And by the way, I think everyone should have a trust. I really do. Like that's my personal opinion. I don't think anything less than a trust is um, I don't think that that protects your estate the way that you want it protected. And a lot of people think, well, I need to be of a certain net worth to have a trust. I don't believe that. I believe you want your assets protected, and I believe that you want to direct what happens with your assets, no matter what, with vivid technicolor and exquisite detail. And you can only do that inside of a trust. And so that to me is really important. But I also think when you have this set up and someone looks to sue you, they're going to be like, well, do I want to do this? This is actually harder than the person who doesn't have a trust. And so you've got some protection right there where a lot of people just say, I don't want to hassle with it.
Well, let me agree with you on one thing and disagree with you on another. Okay. So I agree 100% that most people ought to have a trust. Now, a young adult turned 18, going to college, they probably don't need a trust, but they are an adult. So they ought to have a simple will and they ought to have power of attorneys for healthcare decision making, right? Your son, your daughter goes to college and they get admitted to the hospital. You don't have the right to make their legal decisions any longer. They're legal adults. So having some of those things in place, but I agree with you, most people ought to have a trust. And we hear it all the time. Probate isn't that big of a deal. I hear it from back east clients a lot. It's not that big of a deal. Yes, it is. And it can really turn into a big deal. We have a saying in the estate planning world that you never truly know a person till you share an inheritance with them. And I have seen the best families that I thought would just sell through somebody passing and finalizing the estate like it was cake, no problem at all. I've seen them decide to roll up their sleeves and fight. And the more it is planned out, the less likely that that's going to occur. Avoiding probate, not even just the expense of going through it and paying a bloodsucker like me's legal fees. You're also avoiding all the time and expense of having to deal with it. And you're also creating much more privacy. Probate happens in court, and court is a public forum. I can go down to the courthouse and get copies of anybody's probated documents. And there's a lot of personal information in there, who you are, where you lived, who the beneficiaries of your estate are. So now I agree with you a lot that a trust is necessary. Now, when it comes to the asset protection piece, there's all different types of trusts, from revocable living trust to offshore trusts like we were talking about in the Cook Islands. And each of those different types of trusts have varying degrees of liability and asset protection. It's usually a revocable living trust doesn't have a whole lot of liability protection in and of itself. But remember what I was saying in my situation, it's my wife's trust that owns our home. And it's because she's not a lawyer that we get that protection. But I also do agree with you heavily on asset protection planning's goal. 95% of lawsuits are settled before they ever get to trial. I mean, that's the settlement rates here in the United States. And it's because our system is it's so slow and expensive. And it's been set up that way on purpose. They think that, Justin, if you and I get in a fight, we ought to be able to work it out ourselves. Right? We shouldn't clog up the court systems, so they encourage settlement. And if you go to that settlement negotiation table and you're able to say to somebody, here is my structure, try to break through it, that is so much more powerful than not having a structure at all. And then another thing on that I want to kind of make clear for the audience, because we're hearing a lot of these days, is this idea of keeping your assets anonymous, right? Flying under the radar, this one guy uses all the time when it comes to asset protection. I don't know what the heck that means. When it comes to asset protection planning, if you and I get in a lawsuit, everything comes out. I'm going to find out about all of your assets. The court is going to require you to report all of those assets to me. And now there's all these new laws coming out called corporate transparency that's going to require you to report about ownership of companies. So yeah, what you said before is entirely true. Going to battle with a good, solid plan that you're totally transparent about, that is the ideal when it comes to asset protection planning.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I've always looked at estate planning and creating trusts with this idea that I want some anonymity, right? Like I like actually having LLCs in states where they protect your privacy and they don't disclose who it is, and you can use your law firm to, have the only address and representative listed so people can't connect the dots to you. I've also used trusts in the past where instead of saying like the Donald Family Trust, or where it's like, oh well, now let's put a target on exactly where the assets are. I've always heard that it makes sense for it to be some random name or some whatever it is that you want to create your trust name that doesn't have a direct link. If your favorite color is this, or your favorite animal is that, or your a landmark, whatever it might be, that is harder to link up. So I'm curious if that is accurate or if not. I mean, I guess it's accurate until you're
It's
sued,
totally
right?
accurate. Look,
Okay.
we're not saying different things. We're just saying different things, right? I'm saying have a good, solid structure in place that if you have to disclose it to somebody is protective, right? And what you have to disclose is going to become more and more prevalent based upon these corporate transparency laws. In fact, your attorney, if they set up the company for you, they're going to be required to report to the agency. Your accountant, as they're preparing tax returns for you, they're going to have to report to the agency. But that doesn't mean that you purposefully put your name out there, right? I mean, go tell Trump he can't use his name in one of his companies and he'll punch you in the nose, right? But no, my family holding company in Wyoming is not Howell Enterprises. I promise you. It's some innocuous name that if somebody were to look through the title reports for the properties, just, that low-hanging fruit kind of person who wants to cause me problems, they're not going to be able to find me easily. But if things go to blows and we are serious about suing each other, there's no such thing as staying anonymous. I mean, the court through the process will do so much as not just requiring you to tell me everything that you own. You'll have to disclose to me anything that you moved out of your name in the last year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, depending upon what's going on in the court system. So it's one of these things that I just impress upon my clients: total transparency. Definitely don't put your name out there. Call something different, since we want to try to keep private as much as we can. So I think it's just two different things, but they're not necessarily mutually exclusive.